The global oil market functions as a continuous system, producing and consuming roughly 105 million barrels daily in constant motion. If interrupted at its densest point, the system fractures. A complete closure of the Strait of Hormuz removes 20 million barrels of crude instantly. This single choke point connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean facilitates nearly 20% of total global supply. Some mitigation options exist through Saudi and Emirati overland pipelines. Even with these bypasses operating at maximum capacity, the market is left with a permanent net hole of 13 million barrels per day. Losing 13% of global supply overnight is a catastrophic physical event. Yet, in the immediate aftermath of such a closure, financial markets often react with a confusing delay. Traders look at the benchmark paper futures, like Brent crude, and see prices hovering around $109 per barrel. It is a high price, but it does not yet reflect the physical reality of the disruption. Observing only the financial ticker in the immediate aftermath of a shock obscures the physical supply disaster already locked into the global system. It is a mistake to assume the global oil market operates like a static warehouse, where countries simply begin draining down localized storage tanks. The system is better understood as a highly optimized, flowing chemistry set. It relies entirely on unbroken logistical momentum to keep refineries operational and fuel moving to consumers. When you shut down a primary production hub, the disruption behaves like a time-space shockwave. It radiates outward from the Middle East on a staggered timeline. Closing the strait does not instantly delete regional supplies globally. Instead, it turns off the tap at the source, stopping the front-end flow of new inventory onto the water. Mapping this geographic delay across the ocean explains the initial disconnect between the physical reality of the closure and the financial market's response. A fully loaded crude tanker requires 3 to 6 weeks to physically transit from the Persian Gulf to its final destination. When the strait closes, tankers already on the water continue, but directly behind the final ship is an expanding void. This air pocket hits East Africa first, then overtakes the Indian Ocean, causing localized failure in supply chains heavily reliant on Gulf imports. The physical shortage then reaches the industrial refining hubs of East Asia, starving the infrastructure that powers global manufacturing. Europe and North America possess the longest buffer. It takes more than a month for the last tankers to reach the Atlantic basin before their pre-war flow ceases entirely. When that air pocket finally hits land, it creates a massive vacuum. Panicked refiners aggressively attempt to bid away any floating fuel bound for other regions to keep their domestic economies running. Western financial markets often fail to panic in the first month because the physical air pocket has not yet reached their shores. As the air pocket approaches, the market triggers an automated defense mechanism in the pricing structure, known as backwardation. This chart maps the term structure of oil prices. In a backwardated market, oil delivered today is much more expensive than future deliveries, sloping the curve downward. It's common to mistake this downward slope as a bearish signal of oversupply. During a crisis, extreme backwardation is actually a distress signal for immediate physical liquidity. While futures for delivery months away remain low, actual physical spot purchases in Asia skyrocket. The result is a massive price delta between delayed paper futures and immediate physical crude. This is the spot premium. The spot premium serves a specific function. It penalizes hoarding by creating an enormous opportunity cost for holding inventory. By making oil most expensive right now, the market incentivizes anyone holding a barrel anywhere in the world to dump it into the active system immediately. A steeply backwardated curve is an algorithmic attempt to physically balance a broken system before it runs completely dry. Squeezing existing inventory only buys time. Eventually, the market must confront the extreme inelasticity of global oil producers. Alternative sources like U.S. shale, Canadian oil sands, or Guyanese deepwater projects cannot physically spin up 13 million barrels of daily production in a matter of weeks. This chart illustrates the unavoidable mathematical consequence of that inelasticity, the mandate for demand destruction. Prices must rise until exactly 13 million barrels of daily consumption is financially forced to exit the market. The lowest margin uses are erased first. In advanced economies, this manifests as a painful tax on household disposable income. though the fuel remains physically available for those who can pay. In the global south, the situation is different. Governments and utilities are often priced out of the global market for import balancing cargoes entirely. This leads to absolute physical failure. In India, for example, the LPG cooking fuel market faces structural shortages impacting hundreds of millions of people. When the global supply valve cannot be opened further, price escalation is the only mechanism that prevents total infrastructure collapse. While the air pocket is in transit, a secondary physical deficit accumulates in the background. Oil trapped behind the closure results in shut-in production. These are barrels that stay in the reservoir rather than accumulating in storage tanks. In a single month of closure, roughly 400 million unproduced barrels of oil permanently fall out of the global system. That volume represents the entire size of the largest coordinated emergency release in the history of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Even if the strait reopens tomorrow, the market must still replace this missing volume to return to its previous equilibrium. The structural deficit created during the closure guarantees high global prices for months, as the system works to replace the 400 million barrels that were never produced. A shock of this scale leaves permanent scars on global energy policy, particularly for importing nations in Asia. The air pocket proves that reliance on a single Middle Eastern choke point is an unacceptable national security risk. Importing nations will likely accelerate domestic demand reduction, moving the rapid scaling of electrification and EV adoption from a long-term goal to an immediate necessity. Governments are also incentivized to secure and diversify physical supply lines away from the Persian Gulf entirely. North American producers in the United States and Canada, which operate outside of these primary choke points, become the primary beneficiaries of this new diversification mandate. A 20 million barrel shock forces a permanent shift in how nations value energy security, moving the world toward a more fragmented and diversified supply map.